Hello, this is the Ask Jasmine Money podcast. I'm Jasmine Birtles, founder of MoneyMagpie.com, and I'm joined by the political journalist Paul Osborne. This is a monthly podcast in which we look ahead to see how you can make and save money each month and have a smile as you do it. It's on the Money Magpie newsletter, which you can sign up to on the website. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Jasmine, and Paul's also on Twitter at Paul Osborne. Today, we're looking at ways that you can make money by showing off. Because I'm a big fan of showing off, and I know Paul is, aren't you, Paul? Go on, tell the lovely listener what kind of showing off you do and where.
I am such a fan of showing off that I can find myself to sitting in small booths like this one, where no one can see me, and talking basically to no one for a living. And I have done that now for more years than I care to remember. I have a theory about people who work particularly in radio more than in TV, which is that half of us are compensating for chronic shyness by being on the radio and talking to huge numbers of people without ever having to actually meet them or look at them. And I'm very much in that category. I have a couple of friends who are very much the other category, that they just constantly want to be the centre of attention. And being on the radio is just one of a number of ways of doing that. So for them, it's the other way around. They will be dancing on a table to get somebody to pay attention to them. I will be sitting at the table going, you really ought to get down off the table now.
Well, as you know, Paul, and you, lovely listener, might know too, I do all sorts of things. Yes, I really do go into that category, don't I? Yeah, I've done all sorts of things in what I laughingly call my career. And when people ask me what I like doing best, I always tell them those things that involve the most showing off. I'm like that annoying 6-year-old at school who always wants to be the fairy in the school play and do her thong in front of all the parents. Well, all right, maybe I'm not that bad, but I don't know, there's something quite satisfying about being entertaining and having people watch and listen. I mean, does that make me a bad person, Paul, really?
Not being a psychologist, I couldn't necessarily tell you. I think it's telling and interesting that I can find myself very largely to radio. You may occasionally see me on television if you are stuck in Singapore airport or something. You, on the other hand, pop up on television all the time. And the reason for that is that you look good on television and I do not.
Do you know, and I have said this before and I will say it again, Paul, I think seriously you should be on television more, and I would like to talk to producers about having you on television, because I think you would be a great political commentator on those. It's a bit of a love in this, isn't it? Happily, I am not the only person who's into showing off and making money out of it. For a start, I have a friend, Paul Rogan, who's making a tidy living doing voiceovers from his cupboard. Oh, yes. And here he is. Hello, Paul.
Hi there.
So, Paul, how much did it cost to create your studio?
Yeah, it's like, how much is a piece of string? Some people are ingenious and can do all of it with fabric. I once recorded in Jules Holland's studio, his proper recording studio, and his area to protect the microphone from kind of echoey room noise was a house made out of mattresses. There are lots of us out there in the world now that do voiceovers from converted parts of our houses, and some of those parts of those houses include closets, under the stairs areas like Harry Potter. I've watched as people converted some of their under the stairs triangle shaped areas from Harry Potter style bedrooms into small recording areas, because the key to recording is to find a sort of a dead acoustic space that doesn't sound echoey and like somebody reporting from a war zone via Skype. The main thing is to create an acoustically dead space, because that's the pure giveaway when you send an audition into a professional person. If you can hear a sort of echoey, not echoey is the wrong word, but that sense that you're in a room. You know what I'm talking about. You've all heard those interviews on the radio where somebody's just recording from a big echoey room with the sound bouncing around off all the walls. So a small space is very useful, and then padding that space is very necessary also.
How do you get the voiceover work? Do you have to have an agent?
No. I do have an agent, but you don't have to have an agent for this kind of work. There are lots of websites out there now where people submit auditions online. Voices.com is one, Voice123 is another. That's where expense starts to come in, because these are not free websites. These are websites you have to pay a subscription to. And that will vary according to whatever deal they may be offering at any given time. But you have to pay a subscription, so it's pay to play, and then you have to submit auditions, lots and lots of auditions, and then your strike rate will depend on how well you're doing, how experienced you have become, and that can take a long time. So this is not an easy and cheap way to make money unless you're very lucky and somehow everything comes right straight away.
Can anyone do voiceovers, though? It sounds like, I mean, there are all these websites out there, but I don't think anyone can do it, can they?
It's not for me to say, without talking to an individual, whether they are likely to do well at this or not. There are courses and classes you can take. There are even online YouTube tutorials on how to do all aspects of this, including setting up your little home studio and how to actually do the voiceovers themselves. There's lots of free information out there. So if you have nothing else to do and you really, really like this idea, I encourage anybody to have a go.
What sort of money can someone make who, has a bit of experience? They're doing it fairly regularly, but maybe they're not top of the tree.
Well, some people are making a full professional living at this, and other people are making a few thousand a year as a supplement to whatever else they do. And some people are making next to nothing while they kind of learn how to do it. And most of the time you're in the middle, and then there are some years where it's really, really good, and some years where it's not so good, because it's very competitive. Any audition you submit online, you might be competing against 50 other people for a job which may pay £200 or £300. So there is a lot of unpaid effort that goes into the accumulation of jobs. On the other hand, you may come across a client, as I've had, and we all have had, where once you've successfully done a job for them, they just keep coming back to you because they like you and they like what you do. And that's where it really starts to pay off, because now you have clients who come to you and give you the work straight away.
And what kind of voiceovers do you do? Is it things like straight reads, character voices, cartoons, that sort of thing?
All of the above, and it's a really exciting field. So the latest thing that I'm most excited about is a video game called Raid, which will be coming soon, where I am one of the 4 lead characters, and it's a kind of a World War II adventure. So I've been recording most of my stuff for that right here in my closet, down the line to a company in Croatia, the whole project being managed out of Stockholm by a guy from Liverpool. So this is a truly international world where the internet has opened up jobs for all over the world now. I've done jobs for Saudi Arabia, for Poland, for Germany, for India. And it's incredible what's possible by having this kind of ability to record in a little room and transmit the stuff all around the world.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on, Paul. Now, if you're a real show-off, you probably want to be on X Factor and be a massive singing star. And there's lots of work here and there for good singers. But it's not easy, as manager and performer John Byrne knows. He has a column in The Stage and answers a lot of business questions from would-be actors and singers. And he's with me now. Hello, John.
Hello, Jasmine. How are you doing? I'm live here in the West End, actually, as you can probably hear with the traffic in the background.
Oh, fantastic. So, John, tell me, what are the biggest hurdles for people who want to make a living from performing?
I think probably the biggest hurdle, Jasmine, is simply that the picture that we see on television, whether it's the X Factor or the various reality TV shows like Stage School, the picture that we all see of how you make a living as a performer is often quite different from the actual business of being a performer. And I think a lot of people go into the business believing that it's going to be like they've seen on television or in the movies, where in fact the kind of appearance side of it, the glamorous side, the applause side is certainly part of it, but it's a much smaller part than the behind the scenes hard work grafting side.
Do you think that people realise just how much hard work and graft they're going to have to do to get somewhere in this?
No, I think the two things that aren't immediately obvious from the presentation of how people get their lucky breaks on TV in those kind of programs is that if you look to see the performers who have actually turned their time on those programs into successful careers, quite often you'll see several years in training beforehand. And the thing about training is training's important for two reasons. The first reason being the obvious reason that if you do a little bit of training in whatever your performing career is, it's going to make you better. But the second and probably just as important reason is that I often compare it to being like an athlete. If you're going to run a marathon, you've got to do lots of consistent training simply to build the stamina to complete the race. And you find that people can turn up on a television show and do one or two good auditions or performances. But then obviously if they become successful, they're talking about doing tours, they're talking about doing 8 shows a week in the West End, which separately from the performing talent just takes an incredible amount of physical strength, which you can't build up overnight.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, talking about that, 8 nights a week, that, a lot of people go, wow, if I could just do, more than one a week, I'd be making some money. Do you think there is enough work to go around? Or actually, can you create your own work if you really try?
Actually, in the performing arts business, the only way that you have any chance of being successful is to create your own work. And that's even if you are getting castings, even if you're getting into shows, because show contracts often last anything from 2 months to 6 months to 12 months, and then you're back unemployed again. So the only way that actors can make a living on a fairly constant level is by combining going for castings and looking for work that's been offered to them, and that's obviously a really competitive market, and then finding something that they can do themselves, which is slightly more inside their control.
So you're talking like sort of maybe training, teaching, corporate work, maybe even setting up their own shows here and there?
Absolutely. It could be training, it could be teaching, as you say, it could be corporate work, or it could be just developing a one-person show. What a lot of actors have begun to look at these days is perhaps doing some other related work in the industry. So, for instance, you might have an actor who also starts to work as a wardrobe mistress or a wardrobe master, which means that even when they're not working in their acting job, they're working in the industry, and obviously they get to make contacts and hear about what's going on and what castings are available. Lots of teaching and training work. Some actors will do stand-up comedy. Equally, actors will do interesting jobs that involve acting skills but that you might not necessarily associate with performance. A good example being a civil registrar who does maybe civil ceremonies, weddings, funerals, where you might be asked to direct the service, where you might be asked to do a reading or something at the ceremony. So they're using their acting skills, but at the same time they're also earning a living in something slightly more regular.
I'm getting the idea also that if your talent is something but it's not amazing, you get to the point where you think, okay, I'm not going to get to the West End with this, but I do still love singing, I do still love comedy or whatever. Is it something maybe that you could think of as an extra earner, just doing pubs and clubs and maybe churches and weddings, that sort of thing? Can people make a nice little extra income that way?
Absolutely. And in some ways, there are very, very, very few performers, including famous ones, who make their total living from just one kind of performing. So you'll find that even the people who are in the West End quite often have other businesses they do, as I say, like the teaching, the training, the registraring or whatever. And that's often a very sensible way for somebody who maybe is starting off in the industry, whether they're starting off as a young person or whether it's something they've always wanted to do. A really good kind of business practice is to look and see what they need to earn to survive, and then work out a number of ways in which they can work towards that figure, and part of that might be non-glamorous jobs. Part of it might be some kind of small-scale jobs, such as you mentioned, weddings. For instance, there's some singers who work a lot in care homes, which is actually a really nice thing to do because they're entertaining people and they're kind of using their skills. And most performers need about 5 or 6 streams of income to get themselves to the point where they can say that they have a performing career.
So essentially, even if you get to the top of the tree, it's quite possible you're going to need to have various different things to do. If you really want to make money by showing off, you're going to have to do it in different ways at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things on the nature of the entertainment business is that you get to the top of the tree. Let's say that you're a regular character in one of the big soaps. You have 5 or 6 years where your character is the head of all the storylines, and then a new producer comes in, your character gets killed off, and all of a sudden you're unemployed again. And I think a lot of actors have been caught in that situation. So, as in any business that is precarious, the sensible thing is to have several other streams of income going on. So there are, for instance, there are quite a well-known soap actor who I also know has a successful separate business as a photographer. There are lots of sort of people who do one particular job, which is quite high profile, but then have an entirely separate. There are a lot of actors who are well known for their acting, but are less well known, but in some ways actually more respected for the production or directing or writing work they do.
So if anybody wants to get in touch with you,
it's dearjohn@thestage.co.uk, and obviously I'm also available to preside at weddings and funerals and in care homes. You just drop me an email.
Of course. Thanks so much, John. So that's it. If you do want to make money from showing off, you can do it, but there's an awful lot of work behind it. That's it for us for today. Thank you, Paul Osborne. This has been the Ask Jasmine Money podcast with Jasmine Birtles and Paul Osborne. You can hear this podcast on iTunes, on YouTube, and on the podcast page on moneymagpie.com. Remember to sign up to the free Money Magpie newsletter. Just click the box at the top right-hand corner of the site. And follow me on Twitter for more news at Jasmine, and Paul gives political commentary at Paul Osborne. Come back next month for new ways to make money in